Hey guys, Dr. Arland Hill out at Harvest Hills Ranch. Now, we've been talking about lower body activities and resistance exercises you can do for the lower body. Well, we can't neglect the upper body. We got to work on that too. We got to work on some pecs, some back, some arms, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, hey guys, I am Dr. Arland Hill here with Leah Hill.
Hey guys.
And we have a passion for all things nutrition, health, and wellness related. And today we're going to be looking at upper body exercises that you can do with the resistance band. Now, I want to focus our conversation today on pushing movements and pulling movements. These are fundamental. And inherently, if we work on those, it's going to work on these arm muscles as well. I will have some additional content for you specifically around that, but let's work on the pushing and the pulling. So with that being said, we're going to jump right in here.
Let's do it.
All right. Now, one important thing that we want to do when we start talking about upper body activity, we don't want to set ourselves up for injury. And when we start looking at doing pressing motions, especially when we do things overhead that I'll show you, it's very easy to injure the shoulder. And there's an easy way to avoid this. And to illustrate this, I'm going to have Leah turn around. And what Leah is going to show us here is you've got the shoulder blade against the rib cage. Now, this shoulder blade, ideally, as it moves around, it's for you to be able to press, to do anything overhead, especially once you get up, somewhere in this range and move on up above that. Once you're over about 100 degrees there, so you're going to start kicking in this shoulder blade significantly to maintain that motion. But what you don't want to have happen is you don't want the back portion, this more what we would call the medial portion. You don't want this segment of the shoulder blade pulling away from the rib cage. You want everything staying nice and flat around that. Now, how do you maintain that? How do you do that as we do these exercises? The way that you do that is when you're doing a pressing motion or a pulling motion, you always want to make sure that you can feel your shoulder blades as if they're sticking to your rib cage. You don't want that shoulder blade to feel like it's coming off of the rib cage. You want it to feel like it's staying glued to the rib cage. And when it does that, that's ultimately what is going to allow this motion in the shoulder to be a smoother, more succinct motion, and we don't create impingements in there that can start to cause different areas in the shoulder to hurt or result in some type of long-term injury. Now, I'm not telling you that to make you apprehensive about anything that we're getting ready to do. I'm just sharing that with you as a thought process to have to make sure you're doing these movements right. Now, with that introduction, and again, that will apply to everything we're going to talk about, but with that introduction, Leah is going to demonstrate for us the fly. There's two primary movements when it comes to the chest, and this is going to be our pressing movements, okay? So she's going to demonstrate the fly. I'm going to demonstrate the press. And the difference on these is, just like it sounds, a press is you're pressing out. You're pressing away, okay? Now, what Leah is going to illustrate for you is a fly. And with the fly, the arms are stiff and we're pulling together, right? And so we're going to show you that. And I'm going to show this to you on a central anchor point like we have here with we've got this on one of the posts. And you could be seated, tie this off to a bedpost or a table leg would work for this. Something solid that you can anchor it to. They even make pieces that you can put in a door, close a door on it that'll hold it in the door that would do this. But you can also do this on a bench, and I'll illustrate that for you as well, because you guys know I think the bench is a great add-on tool. They're relatively inexpensive, but it's a great way to keep your workouts diverse. Okay, so I'm going to jump in here and show these guys how to do the press.
Right.
So let's make that happen.
Press and I'm the fly.
All right. To start off illustrating this, I have two bands, and I am going to show you, if you only have one band, how to do this as well. What we're going to do is just catch the band in our hand here. We'll do both sides. And the band is going to naturally be pulling you back. You're going to want to lean forward a bit. And again, we're pressing. So imagine if you were pushing something away from you. That's the movement that we're looking for here. Again, we've got the shoulder blades pinned against the rib cage and we're extending out. And when you're doing this motion, it may seem initially that this is simply a movement that is going to be working on the muscles on the front side of the body. That's actually not true when you do this. You also want to contract these muscles on the back side, these big back muscles back here under the arm that we call the lats or the latissimus dorsi. Those muscles are also contributing to this. And one thing that'll help, especially if you feel like you have any type of stiffness, restriction, lack of motion in this shoulder, we want to also do external rotation of our arm. So what that means is we're going to take the arm and you're going to, I'm exaggerating the movement, but you're going to do this kind of motion with it where it's almost like you're just a screw on your arm, right? You're just screwing your arm there. And so as you're doing this, you'll push out and you can see my hand rotates as I'm coming out. So you push out. Now, if it seems as I'm describing this movement to you that I've given you a lot of things to focus on, don't worry about that. What you want to do here is focus on each one of these one at a time and start with a lighter band until you get the movement. Once you've got the movement down, then you can progress on the resistance. But initially, we want to start with just making sure that we're getting the movement pattern down, and then the weight becomes very easy. So again, think about pushing your shoulders, your shoulder blades, pinning your shoulder blades down against your rib cage. They're sliding around. You're extending the arms out and you're turning those arms. You're turning the hands up as you're pushing out. So think about corkscrewing your hands and then slowly release it back. And you want to repeat that motion again and slowly let it back. Now, as you're learning this, it's a bit easier to do this with two bands because you can control the resistance better. However, I do want to illustrate that if you only have one band, you can also do this same exercise, but just remember that as you do this, there is going to be more tension in the band and it is going to pull you back more aggressively. But same thing here. We want to pin the shoulder blades down, push out, and turn the hands, right? And one thing you'll notice, actually two things you'll notice on this, is that my hands are not that far apart from each other, so we're keeping them together. And this is a significant point of difference when we talk about the fly. The fly is going to keep the hands away from the body. The press that we're doing now keeps the hands initially against the body. And you're going to keep everything tight, tucked together, and think about you're pushing something away from you. That's the movement right there. You're just pushing something away from you. All right? And that's going to be your chest press. As I mentioned with this movement can also be completed on the bench. If you have a resistance bench or a weight bench, a workout bench, whatever you want to call that there, one of the ways that you can use this is to take these and loop it under the bench. And when you loop it under the bench, that becomes your anchor point, just as what we were talking about with the posts or these columns being your anchor point as well. So you would just loop that under the bench, and then the same form would be maintained. You would keep the shoulder blades down, back, and pressed into your rib cage, and then you're pushing up, contracting the back muscles and the chest muscles as you're pushing away from you. So a lot of different ways you can do this. You could even do this from a seated position if you wanted to, just to create a bit of an extra challenge with it. Instead of standing to do this exercise, you could be seated and do this exercise. So that would focus solely on the upper body to be able to do that. Okay, that's the press, the chest press. Now let's look at chest flies. Now we're going to take a look at chest flies, and Leah's going to illustrate these for us. And I did bring a lighter band and set this up just to illustrate the movement here, because now we're focusing more on the chest muscles and we're taking out some of the ancillary muscles here. You're inherently not going to be able to do as much weight with a fly as you do with a press. So Leah, if you will go ahead and set up, I'm going to walk her through doing these, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of key points here. And so what I want Leah to do is she's going to extend the arms out, but we're going to, as opposed to having motion prior, this time we're going to lock the elbows at about a 45 degree angle, something like that, a bit less than 45 here. And what we're going to do is Leah is just going to come around and fly, just like these are wings, right? So we're keeping everything. That's good. That's exactly what we're looking for right there. And you can see these muscles across the upper chest right here contracting. Those are the ones that we're looking to work here. She squeezes that together, slight pause at the end of the movement, slowly comes back and relaxes, or not relaxes, keeps tension everywhere, but slowly releases the movement. That's what we're going to call the negative, or often more specifically talked about as an eccentric, but it's the negative. But we don't want to just let the weight come right back. See, she's starting to let the elbows bend a little bit. We don't want to do that on this. We want to keep those elbows solid, and we're pulling our hands together. Now, you can do the same thing. You can relax here. You can do the same thing when you're doing this that we did talk about with the chest press, which is to rotate those hands down, this is called external rotation. So you're like, think about you're just screwing your hands, right? So if you start from this locked position out here and you're coming around, you'll notice when you do this that your arms naturally have a tendency to roll in anyway when you do that, right? So it's a natural movement for that to happen. Your arms aren't going like this. That's very unnatural. Your shoulder tells you real quickly, that is not what I'm supposed to be doing.
It's a dance move, but it's not a natural
It is not a natural athletic move, right? So we want to take those hands, lock those elbows, bring those shoulder blades down tight. And one of the things I like to do here initially is I like to just set my shoulder blades against the rib cage and get them good and locked down. And then from that position, once I've got that shoulder blade locked against that rib cage, and let me tell you, that can be a workout in and of itself, yes, right? Especially, you're going to feel like as you're starting here that I just feel clumsy when
awkward on camera, and the shirt showed. I was like,
You feel clumsy when you're trying to do that, but it's such an important movement to avoid shoulder injuries. You want to lock that shoulder blade down, keep those elbows in a locked position, and from right here, we just want to pull our hands together, right? And so if we had the bands in here, we would just pull the bands together and then release it. And then pull the bands together and release it, okay? That's what we're looking for throughout this movement. So thank you for demonstrating that. I do want to say with this will require 2 bands. The exception to that could potentially be, and I'll show you one quick variation on this that you can do, is you can't just loop this around your back. I mean, if you have absolutely nothing to tie it off to and you're not using a workout bench of any form, you can do that right there. And that will work too, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And just because I didn't illustrate it earlier with the press,
you can do it too.
You could do the press the same way, right? So we come in here.
That does require a little bit more stability to be able to
Yep.
do that. So you don't throw yourself backwards and forwards.
And I also noticed when doing this, one of the best things to do here is to take this band, and you almost feel like right there with your shoulder blade is to let that band just notch right under your shoulder blade as its anchor point. So that way it's not flopping up and down on your back.
Yeah, because you saw earlier I had the bands too high when I was doing this, so they actually were flopping a little bit on my elbow. So that was my fault. I should have adjusted down, and then would have had more control of the bands.
Right. Okay, those are the primary chest movements that we're going to talk about, but as I've illustrated here, these are not solely chest movements, which is also one of the reasons that I really like these. These are, you guys know I'm all about functional capability, and you know, Leah says, hey, can you help me move this chair or this piece of furniture or
a heavy thing? Give me some credit.
Yes. Can you help me move something heavy? You know, if I do that, I'm not taking my arms out here and pushing like that, right? I want to be nice and compact where I can get some leverage and everything is nice and tight, and I'm stronger when I'm like that. So think about having to push a piece of furniture across the floor. You wouldn't do it with your arms way out, so we don't want to do this exercise that way. You would do it nice and compact, so we want to complete these exercises in the exact same format. Now, we've shared with these guys how to push. Yeah. Well, then that means we probably need to teach them to pull. All right, guys. So we're going to show you a couple of pulling exercises that can work the posterior, the back side of the body very well. The first and most fundamental pulling movement that we're going to do with the bands is a row, a 2-arm row. We can also do this one-handed, but we're going to start with this 2-arm row, and you'll notice that Leah has the band looped around her feet right here. She's sitting on the bench. She could just as easily be sitting on the floor doing this as well, and we could have this anchored off to some type of post or some type of steady support, and she could be doing this movement in the exact same fashion. And we could also be doing this movement in a standing position just as easily as we could be doing it in a seated position. Now, as you get stronger and more capable, you might find that you need to be in a more seated position to keep your body stable and balanced, but that's not for starting out. That'll come with time. Now, what we're looking to do here, I'm going to start with what typically is done wrong with this movement first. And what is typically done wrong is there's far too much of the bicep that is used in this movement. This is a movement of the back, and we're trying to strengthen these back muscles. You'll kick in some of the back side of the shoulder here, what's known as the posterior deltoid, but predominantly we're focusing on the back muscles. Now, you'll recall when I was talking about those presses, doing pressing motions, we keep that shoulder blade sliding around on the rib cage. Well, now we're going to do the exact opposite. She has the arms extended out here, and the shoulder blade is already pulling around on the rib cage. When she pulls back, she's going to be, there you go. She's going to be pulling that shoulder blade back across the rib cage. And one of my favorite cues to know that you're doing this right is to try to squeeze your shoulder blades together. If right in the middle of the back, if it feels like those muscles back there are almost starting to cramp up as you're doing this, you're probably doing it right. And that's also the indication that you haven't been using and training those muscles. Right?
It's happened.
It's happened.
A time or two.
Okay, so I'm going to have Leah demonstrate a rep here, but before she does, I want you also to notice her grasp on the band itself. So if I come here, there's quite a bit of extra band. So you're going to have to take some of the slack out of the band to get an adequate amount of resistance. The back muscles are strong muscles. You may be surprised that you're able to pull more weight than what you think.
And the lower you go, the more tension there is.
The lower you go. So if she took her hand and she moved it up here, there would be even more tension on the band as well. So with that being said, go ahead and demonstrate a few reps. All right. And the way I like to start to the way I like to have someone start to do this is to keep the elbows against the body. As she's rowing there, let me just come over here. We want to keep those elbows down and against the body. Think about poking your chest out as you're pulling your shoulder blades back, and keep that down, keep those elbows down and tucked into the body. Now, there is a variation on this over time where you can begin to lift the arms up, but the technique doesn't differ on that. You still want to pull with the back and not be pulling with the biceps. Inherently, and let me just be clear about this, inherently, as you use heavier resistance, you're going to kick in some of these some of the bicep musculature. There's really no way to avoid that, but that should not be the primary muscle that you're engaging. You're primarily engaging the back muscles. Now, I want to also show one other thing here. And Leah, let me have the band here for a moment. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the band and just double it over, and we're going to make one hand grip, two hand grips, right? Okay. And so we're just going to, there's your band, right? And so now we don't have the slack. Go ahead and pull that for me, right? You can pull that. So just focus on, see, she did that actually fairly easy. Those back muscles are a lot stronger than she gives it credit for, right? And also I noticed something that she just did that I want to point out. She had a tendency when she started pulling, she did this. She pulled her,
I'm a shrugger, it's terrible,
right?
I'm working on it.
Yeah, she shrugged and then pulled back. That's not what we're looking to do. We want to keep the shoulder blades down, and when you're pulling those shoulder blades down against the back, you're not going to shrug. You can't, to shrug, you have to pull the shoulder blade up. The shoulder blade logically cannot go up and down at the same time. Therefore, if we're pulling it down, it's going to prevent us from shrugging. That's better, right? Okay. So again, you can do this with a grip like she has here, where you have the band looped around once here. You can just, or twice. You can have it just looped around once as she started off illustrating. And you can also anchor the bands off to whether it's some type of post or a door jamb, whatever you have, just some type of solid structure that it can be anchored into. When you're doing this, this is a big muscle. We want to train it where we're in a rep range of around 10 to 12 reps. But same philosophy applies with this as with every other movement that we've ever discussed in this content, which is you want to learn the movement and train the nervous system as much as you're training the muscular system, and create those optimal, consistent movement patterns. That way you don't end up hurting yourself. And like we talked about earlier, Leah's having a natural tendency to shrug these shoulders. As she continues to work on pulling that shoulder blade down, inherently she's training her body. Don't shrug the shoulders, don't shrug the shoulders, don't shrug the shoulders. And it just becomes a natural fluid movement within time.
So working out gets easier once you build that muscle memory.
It does get
easier.
easier.
You're not having to think about 15 different mechanisms in one movement. She's like, hey, make sure this is right and go.
Exactly.
Then you focus on counting.
Then you focus on counting. Okay. So what I want to show you, one last thing that I want to share with you is going to be an overhead press. And think about this as you have something in your home you pick up and you need to put it up in a cabinet somewhere. So we need to be able to press over our heads, but do it in a way where we're not going to put that in that cabinet and then let it down and go, oh, my shoulder's aching and hurts and it's going to hurt for 2 days. No, we're going to be functionally capable. So let's take a look at how to build that functional capability, right? The last exercise that we're going to look at today is going to be the overhead press. The motion on this exercise, same thing. I'm going to sound like a broken record at this point with this shoulder blade, but we're keeping that shoulder blade. I'm just going to exaggerate for a moment. Think about taking your shoulder blades and pulling them down, right? When you're looking to go overhead, it's ideal to keep your hands in front of you. Keep things in front of you. When you start to go behind 45 degrees and lift things over your head, you're asking for problems in your shoulder to manifest. So let's don't do that. Keep everything at 45 degrees and in if we're looking to go overhead. So that means when it comes to our hand placement, we're going to put the hands in front and we're going to take those shoulder blades and we're going to bring those shoulder blades back down and set them. And then as we go up, we're going to let that shoulder blade ride out. But we're also, the natural movement of the hand, we talked about how the hand naturally moves because of the way that the joints are rotating, or the joint and the muscles are all working together and causing the bones to rotate and stay smooth in that joint, in this ball and socket here. That hand naturally, regardless of which way you turn your hand, whether it starts off facing you or starts off away, and it's a lot easier if it starts off facing you, but you will find when you go up, your hand wants to naturally rotate out. Don't fight that, okay? Now, if we now begin to apply resistance on this, what we want to do, we want to anchor the band. And I'm going to show you how to do this as a one-handed movement, and I'm also going to show you how to do this as a two-handed movement. If we're going to do this as a one-handed movement to start off here, we're just going to take the band, grab it in the hand, pull it up to us, and we're stepping on it right in the middle of our foot. And you can just take that band and just loop it over your shoulder like I did there. And that really forces everything to be nice and tight. And so as you push up, you'll notice that that hand begins to rotate out. All right? And this is the movement that we're looking for right here. All right, that's the one-hand version. Now, let me illustrate the two-hand, which surprisingly is not going to be much different. We're going to put the feet over the band, both feet over the band. That way we've got it anchored to the floor. One of the things that I like to do when I start out doing this movement is I like to take the band and just rotate it half a turn inside, just rotate the band in like this. And the reason I like to do that is because when I come up with it and I turn, it's in a more natural position in my hands, and it just keeps the band a bit smoother. And so from here, same thing, you'll see my hands are in front of my face, and what I'm going to do is just extend up. All right, so bring those shoulder blades up and around. And honestly, as you're doing this, you should be feeling this in two areas. You should be feeling this through these muscles in the back here that are stabilizing your shoulder blade from moving. And then you're going to start to feel it in these deltoid muscles here. What most people refer to as the shoulder muscles will be the next large area that you feel there. To do this and to start out, I don't recommend starting out with any type of heavy resistance here. This is one that you absolutely want to learn the motion and learn to feel the movement, because if you start pushing up and your arm starts to roll back out, and now you're pushing from the outside out here, the band fortunately prohibits some of that. But if you get in a position where you're pushing out here and this is more of your motion, you're just going to ultimately end up with some problems in the shoulder. That's just not a natural movement for the shoulder to be doing that. So let's avoid that as much as you can there. But the band will help. This is almost an aid to facilitate adequate movement as much as it is a tool for resistance. So with that being said, I'm going to ask my lovely assistant to rejoin me here, and we are going to bid you guys a farewell on doing these upper body banded resistance exercises that are focusing on pushing and pulling,
which
right?
we use at the ranch thousands of times every single day.
Right? So her point to that statement is that these are functional movements, things that you're going to do as you're going throughout your daily activities and being active with whatever your activity is. So you're going to find that this is going to make all those activities that you're doing that much easier to perform, right? Hey guys, if you are interested in how we use this type of information and how we talk about other topics with our patients and help them build and optimize their health, go to drarlandhill.com. If you have any interest in what we do out here at the ranch, the things that we raise, the animals that we are managing out here, and the ethics and the principles that we use to raise food without compromise, go to harvesthillsranch.com and you can find out all about that. There may even be a spot for you with a subscription. Until next time, guys.
Fast.
Yeah, until next time, guys, we'll see you soon.